Hi and welcome to my channel. In today's video I wanted to talk about hanging plants or trailing plants and show you some of my favourite hanging plants in my collection. I think hanging plants form a really good basis in any houseplant collection, and they are fantastic at showing us or kind of offering us those sort of jungle vibes that a lot of us are looking for when we're creating that sort of green space in our homes. When you're designing a shelf like this one up here, for example, I think it's really nice to have plants on different levels. It really adds that sense of texture to your space, and also a lot of the plants that I'm going to show you today are also quite happy in that sort of low to medium light conditions, which I think is also fantastic for a lot of us who maybe don't have a lot of natural light or good natural light in our homes. But before I get into the video, hi, my name's Alexis and this is Wild Houseplants. I'm a houseplant enthusiast and I also work as a houseplant technician, which basically means when I'm not looking after my own plants, I'm looking after other people's. If you don't follow me over on Instagram or TikTok, you can find me there at Wild Houseplants. And if you do enjoy this video today, I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button below, because it really does help out my channel. Okay, let me show you some beautiful trailing plants. So the first plant I wanted to show you today is this. This is the Hoya Bella. And this plant lives literally just up there in the window, and I'll insert some images of the kind of conditions that she lives in. And I'm not a massive Hoya person. I don't have a huge amount of Hoya in my collection. I probably have like 4 or 5 now. But what I love about the Hoya Bella is just this sort of like kind of waterfall of leaves that come down. And also, if you're looking for a Hoya that blooms like crazy, then this is the Hoya for you. She has already bloomed twice for me this year, and she's actually about to bloom again. As you can see here, she's got a couple of blooms on the way, and there is another one as well here. And there's some smaller ones that she's working on again. Now, considering it's currently January and she's going to bloom again, that is just completely bananas to me. And that's why I find her such a rewarding plant. I did have a moment with this plant where she started to go downhill. Her leaves got quite wrinkly and I just felt like her growth was like not looking very healthy at all. And I wasn't entirely sure what was wrong with her, but I was concerned that perhaps that she had flat mites. And so I treated her like, basically I had her up in my bathroom for about a month, and I just sprayed the leaves. Like every time I went in that bathroom, I would just spray the leaves with water, blast off her leaves basically. And then I changed her out of soil and put her into semi-hydro. So she is in, if I can do this successfully, coarse semi-hydro mix, which I get from Soil Ninja. And since I got her into semi-hydro and kept blasting her leaves for what I thought was potentially flat mites, she is now giving me, as you can see, just beautiful, beautiful growth. And I've cut this plant back quite a few times to give cuttings to other people and things like that. And she has just like grown back so quickly. So I just find her really, really rewarding. And a lot of Hoya are quite slow to grow. And they obviously put out these sort of what look kind of like runners, but then eventually the leaves will grow on them. This plant doesn't do that. She just basically will grow and put out leaves as she's growing on the vine. And she's just been such a rewarding plant. And when she's in bloom, she looks so, so beautiful. And I just find her really, really rewarding. So for this one, like I say, she sits up there in this south-facing window. And so I'll put in on the screen what the current foot candles that she's getting. So you've got an idea of kind of the light levels that she receives. And she's just a normal room humidity. I don't provide any extra humidity for my plants. I don't have any humidifiers or anything like that. But according to my current hydrometer, the current humidity levels in the house at the moment are 48%, which, considering it is -3 today and it's January and I'm in the UK, that's not too bad in terms of humidity. But normally for the most part of the year when we're not in the depth of winter, my room here is between like 50 and 65% humidity. So we don't get really low levels of humidity. London is pretty humid, but obviously it can get quite chilly here as well. But she is just happy. And as you can see, like the fact that she's going to bloom and it's currently so chilly, I think she's pretty hardy. And so if you're looking for a hardy, nice green Hoya that just puts out growth quite quickly and blooms really successfully, then I would say this is absolutely one for your list. In terms of propagation, you can literally just take a stem cutting, so cut anywhere on the vine here, and then I would take off a few of these leaves here, and then I would stick that into some damp perlite. So I would literally just put the stem into some damp perlite and she will root quite quickly. You can also do it in water. I just find generally with Hoya that they kind of prefer to root into damp perlite, but they will also root in water. I'm not really a sphagnum moss girl when it comes to propagations. I personally find that sometimes my propagations in moss are more likely to rot, and that could absolutely just be me, that I'm not keeping enough on, like I'm either over saturating them or I'm not keeping them damp enough, and so the roots get a bit upset. But I don't have any issue with perlite. So yeah, if you're looking for one that's kind of easy to propagate and really rewarding and grows fast, then the Hoya Bella is the one for you. The next plant is the neon pothos, and I think probably this might be one of my favourite of all the pothos, or Peperomia as they are known. That's their Latin name. I will put the Latin name on the screen, but they are commonly called pothos, and this is the neon pothos. And this will not be the only pothos that you will see me talk about in this video. I think when it comes to trailing plants, these are like the OG. These are like such an easy, affordable, easy care house plant that I just think it's an absolute no-brainer to have one. And these neon leaves just add such a pop of colour to your home. This one sits on a shelf just on this side, which actually gets very low light, and she is still absolutely thriving. If I was to give her more light, she might be more full, grow quicker, and her leaves would be bigger. But I'm kind of happy with how she is at the moment. I haven't really got anywhere else to put her at the moment. But as you can see, she really is such a beauty and is growing so long and lush. And the great thing about these is often you will notice after a period of time that the top here will look a little bit empty. So you can always chop and propagate. These are just so easy to propagate in water. You just want to cut some cuttings, so cut in between the stem here and the stem here, and just insert this bit with the node here into some water, and they will propagate in a matter of weeks. You can do single leaf cuttings, or you can also propagate a whole stem as well very, very easily. And then once those have rooted, you can add those back into the top of the pot, which is what I've done with this one, just to keep the top of that pot looking nice and full as well. You can also try and add some light from above, and that will encourage more light here, but I don't personally have that situation. I literally just chop and propagate every time I feel like this top isn't looking too full anymore, or looking a bit bald basically. Again, I will put in some pictures of where she lives in my home, and also provide some information about the foot candles that she receives, just so you've got an idea. Again, this one lives in the living room, no additional humidity, and they are just such like forgiving plants when it comes to watering. Like if you underwater them, they bounce back. If you overwater them, they're generally pretty easy to come back from. They will, as I say, take medium to low light, and they're just a no-brainer for me. Like just such a rewarding plant. If you're looking to create a full and lush display like this one quite quickly, you can do what I did here, which is to buy two plants and combine them together. And then you're going to get that kind of lush, bigger plant a lot more quickly. I always say when a plant is kind of affordable, so for me that would be like under £12, I would buy 2 and combine them together. Obviously it depends on what kind of genus it is, but any hanging plants, if you can afford to buy 2 and combine them together, you're just going to get that lush display a lot quicker. And if you're impatient, like I am, then it's a really good way to just basically get that plant looking really fantastic very quickly. So yeah, neon pothos. Up next on the list is this one, and it's just a spider plant, and I think I used to be very rude about these plants. In fact, I know that I was, because I saw them as being just kind of very basic and common. And there's a reason why plants are common, and it's because they are easy care. And as I've kind of gone further into my houseplant journey, I've become a lot kinder to those common plants, because sometimes you just need plants that get on with it and don't require too much of your energy and time. And I saw this one in a garden centre about a year ago, and I just fell in love with it. And I was like, right, I'm going to get myself a spider plant. As you can see, they are amazing at producing these pups. And so if you're looking to propagate, these are fantastically easy to propagate. You can literally just chop these off, stick these little the base of the pup in some water, and they will produce roots and you can plant them on. But I actually love the look of these pups just hanging down, and I think it just adds another sort of dimension to the plant. Again, these are extremely forgiving when it comes to watering. You'll basically notice that the plant becomes, this green on the plant becomes faded, becomes a lot more sort of, faded in colour, and that's when the plant will need to be watered. But you give it a water and they will just bounce back again. The only thing I would say about these plants, and it's not just my one, I've also noticed it with clients' plants, is they are pretty prone to thrips. And the thrips like to basically live right down in the center of the plant, and you will notice the new growth is coming out black, and that's because the little thrip larvae are just having an absolute field day in there. So I have had thrips on this plant quite a few times, and therefore every time this plant needs a water, I take it to the shower and give it a thorough hose down. And that kind of keeps on top of it for me. But it's just something to bear in mind. If you notice that your new growth is coming in black or damaged, then probably check for thrips, and give them a really good blast. And obviously you can treat with pesticides or however else you choose to deal with pests in your collection. But other than that, I think she's actually a bit of a winner. This one lives on the shelf above my bed in my bedroom, and it's a south-facing room, but the shelf that she lives on is right at the back, so it's probably a good sort of 2-3 meters back from the window, and it's also quite high up, so she's not even getting a view of the sky. And therefore I think she is quite a good one if you're looking for a plant for sort of like a low to medium light area in your home. Of course, if you give her more light, they'll just grow quicker. But she's quite forgiving when it comes to light levels and things like that. Again, I'll pop in a picture of where she's living and also the foot candles that she's currently receiving. The next one is another Peperomia or Pothos. This is the Marble Queen Pothos, and you can see it's got this lovely variegation here on the leaves. And this is another one that's just super duper easy. So if you have a golden pothos or a jade pothos and you're looking for one with a little bit of variegation, then this is the one for you. Because the variegation is quite subtle, there's still a lot of green on this plant, so it does grow quickly. Probably not as quick as your golden pothos or your jade pothos, but quicker than some of my other variegated Peperomia. And again, this is another one where I bought 2 plants and combined them. Just to give you that full look a lot more quickly. And again, this one lives in my bedroom on the shelf above my bed and is getting sort of medium light, I would say. The room is bright, but they're not getting a view of the sky and they are quite far back from the window. Again, super easy to propagate, just exactly the same way as the neon pothos, especially if you're noticing again that the top is becoming quite bald. And yeah, easy to repot, again very forgiving with watering. And the only thing I would just say is The leaves do get quite dusty, so just to pop them in the shower on a regular basis, just to keep those leaves nice and clean so the plant can photosynthesize as well as it needs to. And yeah, I just absolutely love this one and think it is just an easy care one that everyone should have in their collection, because it is super rewarding and just giving you that little bit of variegation, but very inexpensive again. The next plant is my variegated string of hearts, and again you can see this one is really very long now. And with the variegated ones, they've obviously got these lovely pinky purple backs. This one is currently living on the end of the shelf just here, and it doesn't get as much light as it would like. And I probably will think about maybe moving it at some point. I used to have it trailing down from one of the window ledges back there, and the pink on that backs of the leaves was this bright pink, and I loved it so much. But currently, when I had to repot the plant, this planter now is too big a base to sit on that windowsill without falling off. So she's on the shelf and she's doing absolutely fine, but I do love those really vibrant pink backs. And you can see there's still some really good, lovely pinky colour here, but I would like it just to be really popping. So I will maybe think about moving her at some point. This is another one, like all string of plants, where they do tend to get quite bald on the top, and you'll still probably have lots of lush growth going down here. So I did take some little cuttings and pop them back into the top here. So you can see there's some tiny little growth here, which is the cuttings that I've put in here, just starting to give me some new growth to fill out this top. I do have a dedicated video on this plant and how you can propagate it, so I will link that down below if you're looking. And that would be the same for like the string of arrows, the non-variegated string of hearts. It's all exactly the same in terms of propagation techniques and care. When it comes to watering these plants, if you get one of the more mature leaves and just feel it between your fingers, if it doesn't need to be watered, it will feel quite firm, quite robust. And then if you feel them and they feel quite thin and not too robust, then that will be a good sign that this plant needs to be watered. One thing I would say that I think generally happens, and when people fall down with this plant, is one, they tend to come in a very dense mix, and you kind of want to get them out of that and into a much chunkier mix. The roots of these plants, or all string of plants, are very delicate and prone to rotting. So I would get it out and I get it into a nice chunky mix. And the second thing is to keep the sort of top layer of the soil quite moist. So don't fully water it through every time. So I will give the plant a really good water, and then maybe on my next watering, I might just do a smaller bit of water just to hydrate those top roots that are more close to the top of the pot here. But I don't want to fully saturate all the way down, because I've probably still got quite a lot of moisture in this bottom part of the soil. So yeah, I probably take it in terms of doing like a full saturation, and then the next water I'll just give it a little bit, and then the next time I'll give it a full saturation. And that is because, yeah, I just don't want these top roots to dry out, because if they dry out, they will die. But I also don't want to oversaturate the bottom part. Anyway, I do explain more in the video that I've got dedicated to this plant. And as I say, I'll link that down in the description below. The next plant on the list is the Hoya linearis, and I absolutely love this plant. It's such a unique plant in terms of just its growth structure, and I just find it's very tactile. The leaves are like furry little fuzzy things, and it is just such a lovely sort of plant to look at, and also very tactile, as I say. I did have a very full pot of this that I bought maybe 3 years ago now, and it was doing well for quite a long time. It was in soil, and then I noticed, and I know that I'm not alone in this because I've heard other people talk about this as well, that the stems just started to look very unhealthy. I was starting to get a lot of like shriveling leaves or shriveling stems, and I just didn't really know what was wrong with it, and I ended up having to completely chop the entire plant, the healthy sections of the plant, and start this plant again from scratch. So I took loads of cuttings, and then again removed the top leaves and inserted the stems into some damp perlite, and again they rooted so wonderfully. And then once I had some nice rooted cuttings, again I put this into the coarse semi-hydro mix from Soil Ninja, and since I did that, it has just really taken off and grown really quite quickly and successfully since then. And it was just like, I probably had 2 or 3, maximum 4. I don't even know if I had 4, just a few stems, and now I've got lots of lovely stems here. So it's done really well, a proper comeback kid. This one sits in the skylight, hanging in the skylight in my kitchen. My kitchen is north facing, but obviously the skylight above, it's basically got a really lovely view of the sky. And that keeps this one really, really happy. It is starting to get a little bit too long now, whereas when I'm walking through the kitchen, it sort of grazes my head. So I may have to think about moving it at some point, but it's really happy there for now. So I kind of don't want to mess with it too much. The thing to watch out for with these ones is mealybugs. I've only had mealybugs twice in my collection. I've been very, very fortunate, because when I'm looking after clients' plants, I come into contact with mealybugs all the time. And they are probably the most difficult pest to completely eradicate. You have to treat them like again and again and again and again. You have to be really consistent with it, because they will just come back. They're a nightmare. And I had found mealybugs on this, and I did treat it with alcohol, and maybe this plant found that a little bit too harsh, and that's why some of the stems started to die off. But anyway, I would say that if yours is struggling, or if you're struggling with pests, then to take healthy cuttings and start the plant from scratch, because as you can see here, that has done so well for this plant, and I'm just so happy that I've still got her in my collection. The next plant is the Cebu Blue Pothos, and I do have 2 of these. I have another one just hanging there on my shelf as well. This one is grown in soil, and that one is grown in semi-hydro, which shows you that they're basically happy in both substrates. And it was just that one was cuttings, and I decided to go with semi-hydro. But yeah, either way, they are happy in both. And if you are looking for a plant to give you those sort of silvery blue leaves, then this is absolutely the easiest one that you can come by. Again, they are super easy to propagate, just the same way as the Neon Pothos and the Marble Queen Pothos. And I just love the colour of these leaves, and I also love this against the pink as well. I think this leaf colour against the pink pot just looks so, so lovely. As I say, this one lives on the shelf just there. It's getting not a huge amount of light, and if it was getting more light, I would say that the leaves here at the bottom would be bigger. You can see the leaves are quite small here, and that's because it's just not really getting as much light as it would love. But at the moment, it's winter, and I just don't really have any more grow lights to offer that space at the moment. Obviously, the more light you give this plant, the shorter the internodal spacing, the space between the leaves will be. And you can see they're quite big here, and that again is just a sign that the plant isn't really getting quite as much light as it would like. But it still looks nice, it still looks bushy, and if this plant was to start giving me runners, then I would just cut those back and propagate the leaves that it did have. But yeah, another one that I just find very easy, and again, just that kind of more unique colour. Just give your plants a little bit of a different colour palette. This is the other Cebu Blue that I mentioned that's grown in semi-hydro. You can see there, this is the Lechuza Pon semi-hydro. And again, as I mentioned before, you can see here just how big the internodal spacing is between the leaves. So this plant is really crying out for a little bit more light. So maybe I will think about putting it somewhere where it can get some a little bit more light. But you can see the leaves on this one are much bigger than the other one. And this is another one that if you get it onto a moss pole, they go bananas, and the leaves get really, really big, and you will start to get fenestrations. and it turns into a completely different plant. So if you look up Cebu Blue on moss poles, I'm pretty sure Sydney Plant Guy and also Melissa, Plants by Melissa, both have Cebu Blue on moss poles that are mature and fenestrated, and they lose this silvery colour, which I love so much. But it is one that I'm thinking about getting some cuttings on a moss pole at some point, but right now I just don't have much space. Next up is the Manjula Pothos, which I know to be a firm favourite in the houseplant community just because of this beautiful, beautiful variegation and the sort of pattern of the variegation as well, which is so, so beautiful. Unlike the other pothos, this one is much more kind of, the leaves are more kind of like a heart shape. They tend to be sort of squatter and wider in their leaf form. And again, yeah, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful plant. I do actually have this very, very long stem here, which has got this bald section here from when I underwatered the plant and those leaves basically yellowed. So what I'm probably going to do with this one is cut this stem off, propagate it, and then put it back into the pot, because I know it's a little bit, I don't know, it's not necessary, but I don't really like the look of this just bald stem here. And also I'd rather it had multiple vines than just one long vine. So that is one on my plant chores to-do list, is just to get this Manjula looking more nice and full with a lot more vines going. But again, super easy to propagate in exactly the same way as I mentioned for the other ones. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting this plant looking just how I have her in my mind, which is a lot fuller. But for now, I've just kind of doubled that vine over like that just to make her look a little bit more compact. Again, this one lives in my bedroom on the shelf above my bed and gets the same levels of light as the Marble Queen Pothos. This is also one that I do have growing on a moss pole. I'll insert a picture of that. And of course, again, if you get these guys onto a moss pole, as they climb up the moss pole, the leaves will get bigger, and those big leaves are just stunning. But I do like to have both examples of the plant, like a hanging version as well as a climbing version, because I think they just give a different vibe. And I think this is one of those plants that you kind of can't have too many of. I do also have another little one growing on the shelf up there as well, just some cuttings. And yeah, I just absolutely adore the variegation on this plant. Because it does have quite big sections of white, it doesn't grow as quickly as some of my other pothos. It doesn't grow as quickly as the Marble Queen, just because of these big sections of white which don't photosynthesize. So it's really relying on the green parts of the leaves for photosynthesis. But yeah, absolutely stunning plant. Every single leaf is different and every single leaf is very rewarding. Next up on the list is the Peperomia Hope, another firm favourite in the houseplant community, I think, just because it's got these really cute, sort of succulent, coin-shaped leaves. And again, it's just another textural one that just sort of is really fun and nice to look at. I've had this plant again for a couple of years. I'll put in a picture of what it was like when I got it. And I've not really had too many issues with this plant. Again, like Peperomia do have very fine root systems. And I think, again, if you don't have it in the right soil mix, that they can rot quite easily. I've been quite fortunate enough with mine not to have that situation. I do have it in a really chunky mix and I am quite careful with watering. Again, this is another one similar to the String of Hearts where I basically let the leaves tell me if it needs to be watered or not. And I can tell this one is now ready for a water. So I thought it was quite a good kind of time to show you. But again, if you just feel the leaves between your fingers, if it feels like you can bend it quite easily, which I can with this one here, that is a sign that this plant is now ready for water. Whereas when it's just been watered the leaves will be really, really, really firm and you won't be able to bend them. Just be careful that you don't snap the leaves when you're doing this. But yeah, and you can even see with this one here that it's even like quite wrinkly. So I've probably let this one go a little bit too far. And when you are testing the leaves, choose one of the more mature leaves to do it, because the new leaves that come through are just generally a little bit softer anyway. So yeah, choose one of the more mature leaves to test, and test a few different ones. Just to make sure. But yeah, now I can tell that this plant is definitely ready for a water. This one is in soil, but I think it's another one that would do really well in semi-hydro also. And again, I've had a few people talk about issues with propagating this plant. I have managed to propagate it successfully a few times. Again, I take a stem cutting, remove these leaves here, and then insert this node here into some water. Now, what I would say is take multiple cuttings, because I think I took maybe 5 cuttings and a couple of them did rot. So only 3 out of 5 did take. So I would take multiple cuttings, but I think also another one that would do better in damp perlite than it would in water. And also let the cut callus for a couple of hours, so it's hard to touch and not wet anymore, before you put it into damp perlite or water, just to try and prevent it from rotting. And again, from what I remember, it did take a little while to root. And again, of course, spring and summer is when you're going to get the fastest propagation out of these guys. But yeah, I've not really had too many issues with it other than that. I've never had pests with this plant. That's not to say you can't have pests, but I haven't personally. And this one sits up in my loft, which is south-facing and gets a lot of light in the spring and summer, because it's got 2 big Velux skylights with an unobstructed view of the sky. I don't think this plant wants to be absolutely blasted with light, but it can absolutely... My light's just gone off, 1 second. Okay, sorry about that, my light died. And basically, because it's so dark in this part of the room, if I don't have a light on me, then you wouldn't be able to see me. So I had to stop and charge that for a bit, but I can't remember exactly where I was. Maybe I was talking about the Peperomia Hope, but I think I probably finished talking about that. So yeah, we'll move on to the Pothos Enjoy. This was an IKEA find. Again, cheap and cheerful. I would say this is the slowest Epipremnum I own. It took a really long time to get going, but now it has started getting going. It's going, if you know what I mean. And it's starting to give me some really beautiful growth. This plant also came with spider mites, which I didn't realize for a while. And it's another one that I just kept it in the bathroom, and every time I went in there, I would just shower the leaves and they're gone. So yeah, I think the main thing with spider mites is obviously, again, you can always treat them. There are lots of products on the market, but just blasting the leaves off as often as you can without saturating the soil will just keep pushing them off. And every time there's eggs, it pushes them off. And I find that just to be the most successful way of getting rid of them. So I probably had it in there for like a month. And as I say, every time I was in there, blast it, like as much as I could. And now it's spider mite free. So yeah, again, a super pretty one. The leaves generally tend to be smaller on this one than they do with some of the other Epipremnum. But actually some of the new leaves it's giving me are sort of bigger. And they're starting to look more and more Manjula-esque. Like some of these leaves are really Manjula-esque. But yeah, again, another sort of like easy kind of easy care plant. Again, will tolerate there's like lower light levels as well. And again, it sits on the same shelf next to the Manjula pothos in my bedroom. And again, just super nice and easy, and another lovely sort of variegated leaf pattern and a pop of colour for your shelf. Next up is the Scindapsus Pictus exotica, and this is often called the Satin pothos, but it's not a pothos, it's not an Epipremnum, it's a Scindapsus. And again, very common, very, you know, you see them around quite a lot. But and there are a few different varieties within the Scindapsus genus. but a lot of them do have quite similar markings on the leaves. And what I like about the Scindapsus is, for me, it's one of the few ones, and this is what I think makes its growth pattern a little bit different from the Epipremnum, is it kind of grows it out to the side a little bit. And I just love that. I love the way its leaves display. And this one sits in my bedroom, but on a shelf that's kind of behind the chimney breast, so it doesn't get very much light at all, which is why you end up with stems like this, with huge sections, bare sections basically. And it basically, this plant will produce runners. And runners are when the vine will keep growing, but rather than giving you a leaf, it just won't produce one, and you'll end up with these bare sections here. And that is a classic sign that this plant isn't receiving enough light in my bedroom, which I'm well aware of. If you can, with runners, I just tend to cut them off, and if there are any leaves, I'll propagate those and then put them back into the top of the pot, and then try and move it to somewhere with a little bit more light. But right now, I kind of don't really mind that. I mean, I don't like this sort of leggy look, and I'll just cut those back and propagate them. And then in time, it will get a little bit more light, obviously, as we come out of the winter months and we move into hopefully warmer, sunnier times. But yeah, I have quite a few of these in my collection. I have one that I grow around a trellis, and I've got other little ones as well. And I've got one that I might actually end up combining with this one just to create a fuller plant. One thing I would say about Scindapsus is they really don't like being repotted. They do tend to take a little bit of time to bounce back after a repot, and they may give you a few yellowing leaves. They're not as hardy in my experience as the Epipremnum at being repotted. So when you do repot these guys, just don't mess with the roots too much. Do try and kind of basically take that plant and then put it into a bigger pot and then provide some additional soil. Don't kind of try to mess with the roots or kind of tease them too much, because in my experience they don't really like that. But other than that, they are super, super hardy. Another one that I just kind of let the leaves tell me when they need to be watered. If they feel really firm and plump, then I let it go. And if it feels more sort of sad then and like sort of thinner, then I will give it a good water. And yeah, I think another one that's just a great one to have in your collection. Again, a very different kind of colour. You've got this sort of dark blue almost with this sort of silvery colour. And again, just another lovely one to add to the shelf. Another lovely new leaf coming in there. They're so pretty, and they're almost like sparkly as well. Just really pretty and a no-brainer for me. Up next is this, the Philodendron Brazil. This is actually the only philodendron I've got on this list. I do have a Philodendron scandens, just the green version of this plant as well, but it has recently had thrips, and so it's not looking its best at the moment. So I'm featuring this one, which is obviously the Brazil, which has got this lovely sort of yellowy neon green stripe down the middle. And when the leaves come in, they are more sort of yellowy, like here, and almost like a little bit orangey as well. And then as they mature, they get much more of this sort of neon green color. And this one would be more trailing, but I've actually got it growing around this heart-shaped trellis here. And there's no real reason to that. It's just purely aesthetic. I thought I had these trellises and I thought I would try growing some few plants around them. So I've got one with a Scindapsus on. I've got this one. I've got my Hoya Crimson Princess on one. And I think they look really nice, and just another way to display them. And then as this plant grows, it will start to trail down much more. And I think it's just, yeah, I think it just looks really nice and pretty. This one lives next to the neon pothos on the shelf just up there. Again, it's probably more of a medium to low light spot, and I think it would probably have a nicer, bigger growth if it was getting a little bit more light. But again, I'm kind of quite happy. Sometimes you just want plants that kind of stay the same size and not always growing and needing to be chopped and propagated, or just, you know, whatever. So sometimes it's quite nice, as long as the plant is doing well, as long as the plant is able to soak up the water that you're giving it. You're not giving it too much water too frequently, because the main thing that happens when you have a plant in a lower light area is if you continue to water it as if it was living in higher light, then you are going to come into issues with root rot. But you have to obviously bear in mind that if you've got a plant living in a lower light spot, you need to massively reduce the watering and really check the soil and make sure the plant needs it before you water it. If you follow those rules, then you can get away with certain plants in lower light areas of your home. And yeah, this one's doing well, but as you can see, some of the new growth that's coming in, it's just a little bit smaller. And as long as you sort of don't mind that, then yeah, you can absolutely have these plants in lower light areas of your home. Up next is quite a small one. This is the string of pearls. And I bought this as a very small plant. It was in a very tiny pot like this. And it's actually probably quadrupled in size since I got it. So you can see it literally was a very small plant. I think it was like, I had some plants in my basket and I needed to spend an extra whatever to get free shipping. And so I put this plant in there, and it's grown a lot in that time. And this is another one that people tend to struggle with. Again, it's got a very fine root system, and you just need to be really careful with the watering, and you need to kind of treat it the same way you do with the string of hearts, which is maybe do one watering with a full saturation and then just a little bit to top up those roots at the top level, but not to fully saturate it. The other thing I've seen with these is they tend to come in really tall pots, which I've got no idea why, because you've just got way too much soil around a very fine root system. You want to plant it either in a very small pot, like I have this one here. You can see all those roots coming out the bottom. It may be due for a repot, but I'm not going to do that until the spring. Or you want to plant it in a very shallow pot, so the roots are not like surrounded by too much damp soil, and that will make them much happier. You can also try putting them in terracotta, which is obviously porous, and that will dry out the soil quicker as well. And I've heard people talk about like feeling these ones, and if they feel squishy, giving them a water. That really hasn't been my experience, because for me the pearls always feel firm whether it needs a drink or not, and I can tell it needs a drink because I've got it in this little clear pot and I can see those roots currently look dry. And it also sits on my windowsill just at the back there. Now obviously it's winter and that window is cold at the moment, so these plants on this windowsill have to be relatively hardy. You'll notice that the ones I've got up there, I'm not even sure how far back you can see, but I've basically just got a string of plants and succulents and Hoya and sort of cacti and things like that, which are quite hardy in the cold months. They can tolerate quite low temperatures, they just don't like being too wet in those temperatures. So just to keep an eye on watering. But obviously when the sun does come out, we have had some sunshine today, we had some sunshine yesterday, even though it's -3 today, that they are obviously then getting a lot of nice light. So I just basically check the soil, and when the soil is completely dry, I give this plant a water. But as I say, just to keep an eye on not letting those top roots here dry out too much. So just keeping an eye on that, and it's been really happy and I've had no issues with it. So far so good. And the last one on the list is this. This is the Lepismian bolivianum, I believe. If I have that pronunciation incorrect, please feel free to correct me. And I used to have an absolutely huge specimen of this plant, and it was such a stunner. I will put pictures in. I absolutely adored it. But the stems just kept rotting, and I was really struggling with the plant, and I tried to repot it and it did better for a little bit, and then the stems continued to rot, and they would just rot here at the base, and then that rot would just travel down the whole stem until the stem just collapsed. So I was really having issues with it. So I chopped up the whole plant, all the healthy sections, and propagated them. And this is all I've got left, because not all those propagations were successful, but these ones were. And this plant is actually still in perlite. And it's actually quite dry at the moment. I definitely need to give it a little drink. But yeah, this plant is just in perlite, and it's the happiest it's ever been. So I'm not going to mess with it. You can absolutely grow in perlite full time. You don't have to have plants in soil or semi-hydro. You can grow in perlite. So if you find a plant and you've got it in perlite and it's happy, it's okay, as long as you're providing nutrients by way of fertilizing that plant, it will get everything that it needs and it doesn't have to be in soil. Yeah, as I say, I will just keep this guy in soil now. And now in time, as it gets a bit bigger, because obviously it had a massive shock and it's much smaller than it was, I could propagate these. You can literally cut anywhere on the stem and root that in damp perlite. You can try water. I've had mixed success with water. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes they've just rotted. And I could fill this plant out a lot more. Again, this one sits just on the windowsill there at the back, so it gets lots of light from that south-facing window. But again, it's quite cold at the moment, so it is getting a bit of a chill. So I'm not expecting too much from it, obviously, in this winter. But these are all new stems that it's putting out here, and it is honestly, every stem is healthy. There's no rot at all. So what I do to water it is I just put a little bit of water, fertilized water in the bottom, and let my perlite soak it up, and that has been working quite well. So this is definitely another comeback kid, but I'm still so pleased that I've got this smaller section of it, but I do miss the big full one because it was so beautiful. Okay, and that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed looking at some of my favorite trailing plants. As I say, I think trailing plants are a really good basis for any houseplant collection, or even if you don't have a houseplant collection but you're just looking to add some texture, dimension, colour, and kind of creating a little bit of those sort of jungle vibes to your space. I think trailing plants are a really fantastic place to start, because as I say, they tend to be pretty inexpensive, and also they can deal with multiple light levels. So they're a really good option for beginner plant parents. And yeah, if you have any favorites in your collection, please drop them in the comments below, because you know I'm always potentially looking to add some more trailing plants to my collection. And if you have any questions also, please drop them down in the comments. I do reply to all my comments. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like it, please think about sharing and subscribing, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.